Hey everybody, Brian Mittman here with Coffee with the Disability Guys, and I'm excited to bring back our interview series once again, and today bring back a guest, my friend John from Morgan & Morgan, John Sedgh, and he was with us in the past talking about some interesting topics, and we have another really good topic to talk about today, but we're just excited to be able to bring you information that you need so you can try to figure out and make decisions about whether you need to, should, or even can bring a lawsuit when you've been injured by some type of either device, by the negligence of some other person, or where you're just saying, wow, I wish I could sue somebody. We're here to try to help you answer those questions and figure it out. And the reason I like to do this as part of the Disability Guys, I always say that disability does not discriminate. It doesn't matter whether you are a hardworking Joe or a super successful professional, whether you live out west or down south or here in the Northeast, disability, illness, and injury happens, and there are a lot of avenues of recourse that you may have, and we are here to educate you about that. So enough of the introduction, and I'd like to welcome you back, John. How you doing today?
Thanks, Brian. Great to be here.
So even though you've been here before, for anybody that's listening to us for the first time, why don't you give us kind of the quick who am I overview and why we should listen to you.
My name is Janssen Sedgh, like Brian mentioned earlier. I'm a partner at Morgan & Morgan in New York City. We have offices across the country in every location you can imagine. And we primarily handle plaintiffs' civil litigation. So anytime somebody gets hurt, like Brian said, no injury is too small. We handle everything from car accidents to pharmaceutical cases to employment discrimination cases, and we're here to help with whatever you need.
Fantastic. And just to let everybody know, yes, that's Morgan & Morgan that you see advertised across the country, and they are excellent attorneys, and we love teaming up with them because you have to get the right recommendations. Whether you like a particular attorney or not, or you have a trusted mentor or resource, being able to also then be put onto the right people is even more important. And we are always thrilled to have Jonathan and his team here. So again, thank you. So today we are going to talk about Elmiron and maculopathy lawsuits. So what the heck is that? Imagine this situation, and it happens a lot. Imagine that you are taking a medication for a medical condition and it's helping you. Fantastic. But what happens if somewhere down the road that medical treatment, that prescription, causes some type of either unexpected damage or some type of damage or injury to you that you may not have actually taken the medication had you known you could have those problems down the road. And unfortunately, this happens over and over and over again. One that's been in the news a lot, and is not even a medication, is you hear about talc, right? That there was asbestos and other contaminants in the talc that was used, and especially women used it, and it caused cancer down the road. Well, unfortunately, Elmiron is a medication that is basically doing that again, and we're going to talk about that and what that means. Elmiron is a drug that has been prescribed to millions of people since I think around 1996, and it basically helps with interstitial cystitis. I can't even say that. How do I say that, John?
Interstitial cystitis, or bladder pain.
Yes. So basically, painful bladder syndrome. So that's why I have Jonathan here, because I can't pronounce those things. Anyway, back in around 2015, researchers and science started to produce evidence and information that, unfortunately and curiously, a lot of women who were taking this particular medication for that condition that it usually helped with were also developing an eye disease called maculopathy. So what we're going to do today is we're going to talk about this in a little bit more detail about kind of what's behind it, what can you do as an individual, why would you turn to an attorney who's handling what's called a mass tort, a multiple injury cases, and kind of the positives and negatives of looking into that. So without further ado, unless you have anything on the very, very background, in fact, that's what I'm going to start out with. Jonathan, tell us in a little more detail, or maybe a little more, it can be technical, not, but however you would describe it, what is this all about? Because frankly, if I'm taking a medication that has really helped me out, it's kind of one of the risks I took, down the road, because I said, hey, maybe something would happen, but man, I have to take care of this condition now. So let's talk about that in light of Elmiron.
Sure. Like you said, a patient needs to be able to know about all the risks and benefits of a drug before they take it, so they can make a decision as to whether or not they would want to take that risk. And unfortunately, with Elmiron, up until 2020, there was no warning that was issued to doctors or to patients to inform them of this severely debilitating eye condition called pigmentary maculopathy that could lead to blindness.
So, and what year was that they first
that was in June 2020.
Okay, so in June of 2020 was the first time that they started placing a warning on this medication?
Correct.
Okay.
And our claim is that the company knew back in the 90s and 80s when it was being developed and approved that there were adverse event reportings where patients and doctors would inform the pharmaceutical company and the FDA that there were issues related to the eye with this drug. And until research started to develop more thoroughly, like you said, in 2015, it wasn't until 2020 that the actual label was changed for the doctors and the patients to be aware of it.
So let's say you're listening to this right now and you're like, oh my gosh, I know I've had some eye problems. I don't quite know what it is, so I'm going to run back to the doctor to get that checked out. I think I took that drug, but it was years ago. So, what is this all about? What would a person, because in a way, again, I'm just kind of trying to think like the average, person is, oh my God, I took this medication. It did what it was supposed to for my bladder. I don't read those warnings anyway. There's tons of warnings. You see the commercials on TV and they talk really fast about all the things that could happen, and you kind of laugh about it. You're like, oh yeah, everything can happen,
right.
Plus the kitchen sink. So what's what's the recourse for somebody? So somebody develops this horrible eye condition and may go blind or has already gone blind. What's the recourse?
The first step is to first determine whether or not you took the drug. So if you did take Elmiron, the next step would be to determine whether or not you have any eye issues. And with this specific injury, pigmentary maculopathy, it's a disease that isn't specifically diagnosed by doctors unless they know to test for it. So there's certain imaging that an ophthalmologist or an optometrist needs to do to determine whether or not you have this signature disease. There are a lot of other eye problems that are associated with the same symptoms that lead to pigmentary maculopathy. So it's possible that somebody may be at home right now and say, I have central vision loss. I see dark spots. I have difficulty reading. And their doctors may be treating them for another condition. But if they have this additional testing done, we'd be able to make a connection between the Elmiron and the maculopathy.
And, how does somebody go about proving that they took Elmiron in 2005? Here we are in 2022 almost.
We would speak to our clients and we would go over with them all the pharmacies and all the doctors that they've seen or been treated with over the years. And we would order the medical records and pharmacy records to determine whether or not they actually took the drug. In some instances, there could be a pharmacy that no longer has their records, or there could be a doctor where we could catch notes where they put in the person's medical records, I prescribed Elmiron, and that would suffice.
So if an individual believes that they took Elmiron for this bladder condition, well, I guess we would start there. You have painful bladder condition and that, I better, I took medicine for it. You can at least, that's the starting point. And
Correct.
assuming we can tie it to this Elmiron, one of the suggestions would obviously be, if you're having any type of vision loss, is to ask your doctor for that specific type of test.
That's right. And you could contact us. We could go over all the specific testing and the conversation that we would want you to have with your doctor, so long as it's in the best interest of your treatment and care. And then we could take the next steps from there.
So let's kind of fast forward then. So we have this background, and it's a very clear background. In fact, compared to some of the drugs and things that we hear about, there seems to be a fairly, kind of follow the bouncing ball. You have this problem, you got prescribed stuff, years later you have this problem, you're having issues, and so on. So that's great in the sense of I don't want to say it's linear, but it's very easy to follow. It's not some type of very, very strange hidden something or other. But what is a person to do? Because if I get into a car accident, I know I am going to sue somebody. Hopefully that, I could sue somebody that hit me. So why wouldn't I just hire, if I have this problem, why wouldn't I just hire an attorney and sue the company? What's different about this type of litigation?
This type of litigation is called a mass tort complex litigation. And drug cases against pharmaceutical companies take expertise, it takes experience, and it takes an army to take down a multi-billion-dollar company. For example, in this case, Janssen & Johnson. And to hire somebody who's handling car accident cases for their entire career, to ask them to come in to review FDA documents, clinical trials, and take depositions of pharmacovigilance employees at the FDA or at the pharmaceutical company could be a bit of a stretch. So we've been doing this for the past 30, 40 years. We have a book that we follow, and we've been successful in the past, and we're very confident that we'll be successful in the future in this instance.
So we know we're going to hire the right person. So am I bringing my own lawsuit, or I hear people talk about, you said mass tort complex litigation, people talk about class actions. I know that a mass tort is not a class action. Where they're similar is there's lots of people involved on both sides in both types of cases. But how would you best describe a, quote, mass tort to a person that's reaching out to you, says, I took this drug, I have this problem, I had the test, please help me, when are we going to court?
Good question. So a mass tort could be a little bit deceiving because of the similarity that people have in their heads with a class action, like you said. But for a mass tort litigation, every individual has their own lawsuit filed in court. And the merits of your case determine how far you go and what settlement you'll receive ultimately at the end of the day. So there's nothing dependent on what happens to plaintiff number 1 or plaintiff 1,000 in determining your case. But in a class action, that is determinative.
And it's my understanding, it's not just what your individual injuries are and damages, but what you're able to do, though, is you're able to pull together all of these cases so that, as you said, when you're reviewing these millions of pages of electronic documents and you have an army out there going through it all, you don't have to do it for every single case every time. You're doing it one time and trying to apply to all the cases. Is that correct?
That's correct. So, for example, right now there are about 600 individual plaintiffs with a lawsuit against Janssen & Johnson with regards to Elmiron and pigmentary maculopathy. All these cases were centralized in front of one judge in New Jersey, Judge Martinotti. And what the system in place has is that the judge selects a handful of law firms to represent the entire country in order to be more efficient and not have to take depositions over and over again. My office, my partner, Paul Pennick, was appointed by the federal judge to be one of 3 attorneys to lead the Elmiron litigation in the multi-district litigation in New Jersey. And beneath these 3 attorneys, there's an army of 20 other law firms and associates and partners to take on the pharmaceutical company. they're producing tens of millions of pages of documents that we need to go through. There are going to be dozens of depositions that we need to take. And with the right leadership, we'll be successful.
Fantastic. It's great to be able to, pull the resources of experienced attorneys together in order to really fight these big companies, because I don't know the specific numbers, and I don't know if you do, but I've seen this in other cases. We're talking about medications that they're selling where they're making billions of billions of dollars a year over 10 or 20 years, knowing that that medication also causes these problems. That's just my little aside there. Anyway, so what, in general though, what, describe, and I know you can never describe specifically for a specific person what they're going to get or anything like that, but what are the basic types of benefits or compensation that somebody is seeking when they're injured by a pharmaceutical and have this type of condition? And I'll follow up with do these cases settle, but what are the basic benefits that somebody is looking for in a suit like this?
Well, in this specific circumstance, we're dealing with an eye injury, and it could be to one of your eyes, it could be to both of your eyes. And unfortunately, with this disease, it could lead to ultimate blindness. And in order to compensate somebody for their pain and suffering of leading up to that, all the treatment that they need to have, their life changes, it affects their family, it affects their business. They may not be able to work any longer, may not be able to drive any longer. All these things need to be taken into account ultimately when a compensation that we think is correct for these individuals.
So like any type of lawsuit, we're seeking loss of future earnings, we would be seeking pain and suffering and how it affects your life, out of medical expenses, and all the what I would call the normal things that you're claiming in a lawsuit, but clearly specifically focused upon what has happened here because of the prescriptions.
That's right.
Okay. Is there any well, actually, let me ask you this. Okay, so you have this medical condition. As you said, it's something that you have to look for. Most doctors just don't diagnose it. Are there other things that cause this condition? And then how do you kind of figure that out? Is there like is there a hobby? You're some type of artist and, you're always staring at light. I don't know. How do you kind of distinguish that type of stuff?
This is actually a signature disease that to this point has been related to Elmiron. There are other diseases like macular degeneration that have similar symptoms, but specifically the pigmentary maculopathy, where the macula is actually damaged. There's a mechanism to show that it's related to the Elmiron.
Wow. So this is probably something that basically is not normally seen, and all of a sudden there's this huge increase in these types of cases, and that's where the link back to the Elmiron has been.
Correct. And that's why a lot of doctors don't even test for it, because it's not something that's so common in their patients yet.
I'm probably going to make my eye doctor nuts when I go see her in a few weeks. Be like, well, could you check me for all these things? Never took Elmiron, but anyway. What else does somebody need to know if they're thinking, about, next steps in a situation like this? What would you let people know?
The most important thing is to just pick up the phone and speak to somebody, whether it's my firm or another firm, and just discuss your options. If you actually do fall into the category where you took the drug and you have this eye injury, figure out what your options are. If you come to my firm, we'll tell you that there's no need to put any money out of your pocket up front. Everything is done what's called a contingency fee basis, where we put out all the money to order your medical records, to file your case, to litigate the matter, and we're only compensated if we're successful at the end of the day.
Okay, so that was talking about the actual lawsuit, but there are some things that people can do as well, and other benefits in particular, because we're dealing with blindness, and this is where my interest originally came out when I started hearing about Elmiron, and then we had the discussion. Social Security disability is a benefit that an individual can obtain if they have an injury or illness that keeps them from working. And there are special rules, more helpful rules for blindness. So at least in the shorter term, if you develop blindness and problems as a result of this type of injury, you could actually bring at least two claims. You could bring a Social Security claim, and then we would also have the lawsuit through Jonathan and his law firm. So people have to really start thinking about and start planning for various various contingencies or various things that happen, and hopefully they have family support and they're able to get through this, because if there's one thing I know, a Social Security case can take time. How long does a case like an Elmiron lawsuit take?
The mass tort MDL was created in December 2020. So we probably have another 3 years to go. We're ultimately going to get to a trial, hopefully by the end of next year. And at that point, hopefully that'll put some pressure on the defendants to start talking.
And these usually, even though there's trials and verdicts, sometimes for the defense, hopefully more times for the plaintiffs, because you pick different cases to try. Ultimately, the goal is to try to lead to some type of overall settlement where each individual can get some type of value for the level of injury they have. Is that accurate?
Correct. There's usually what's called a global resolution in these types of mass tort cases. And every individual is allocated a certain amount of money determinative on their specific facts. So if somebody took Elmiron for a year, they may not get as much money as somebody that took the drug for 10 years. If somebody has blindness in one eye, they may not get as much money as somebody that has blindness in both eyes. So it all depends on your specific facts.
Is there anything else that you'd like to add at this point? I mean, this has been incredibly, informative, and it's something that I think a lot of people can really, in a way, quickly and easily understand. So is there any other issues or things that people should be thinking about when thinking about, bringing a lawsuit for Elmiron?
Just that if you took the drug and you have any eye issues, whatever it may be, something small like you have difficulty reading or something more serious, just pick up the phone and call somebody and speak to them. And if you took Elmiron and you don't have any eye issues, just keep this in the back of your head just in case something happens down the line.
Very, very good, good advice. And as always, thank you for joining me. We're definitely going to have you back for some other topics. But again, for anybody that, as Jonathan said, is having either eye issues and they believe they took this medication, or you took the medication and may not have eye issues, it's definitely worth looking into. You can reach out to the disability guys. You can reach out to Jonathan's office as well. We'll be providing all the information. And thank you very much.
Thanks for having me, Brian.